Shrutismritipurananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhedu Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Gukarastvandhakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishabhai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padam Bhujanmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane. So we will resume our classes on the Brahmananda section of Pancadasi, chapters 11 through 15. We had a 2-week interruption to talk about Anasakti. So with that, after the 9th of August, this is the continuation of the class. So this is something that is really a very appropriate and a very important part of the analysis of ourself in our lives. Because certainly there are aspects of our existence and our awareness, our knowledge, which is very revealing. But as the treatment of these 5 chapters goes to show, the most important thing in our life, if we analyze it, is joy. Some real ananda. The real ananda. So that is an important thing that we will look into, the unreal ananda and the real ananda. So that is, please keep that in mind. So that's the most important thing in our lives. And so this is what was pointed out earlier, that really speaking, if you analyze our lives and our experiences, our desires, our way of going forward in our life, our goals, what we are all seeking is Ananda. And we also pointed this out in the 2-section classes on Anasakti, because that also points out in different ways the same fact. And that fact is that if you really sit down, think about it coolly, what you really want is a pleased self. I want to be a pleased, happy self. And all of your activities in life are a testimony to that. That is the core of all of our transactions, our relationships, as we pointed out in the Anasakti. So really speaking, the most important thing that we do And this was pointed out very directly in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which we quoted in the Anasakti classes, which is Atmanastu Kamaya Sarvam Priyam Bhavati. So other things become priyam to me, they become a loving experience to me only when I am pleased. So it is very, and the fact that I like the pleased self is not negotiable. See, this is one distinction between reality and unreality. If my love is conditional, then that is not the real love. But if it is unconditional, and this is very logically true, isn't it? So, because if there are boundaries to anything that I do, that means there are dependencies, and that is not what I really want, because I may postpone. You know, if somebody said, supposing I give you, $10,000, supposing you win a lottery for $10,000, and you feel, my God, that's more than I expect, that's wonderful, I wouldn't want anything else. Well, that's not true, because at this moment you may not want anything else, but if you already have deposited $10,000, your sense of incompleteness and the sense of desire does not go away. So it's very clear that what we want is not conditionality, but unconditionality, as we will see in more detail on this. So, so the Ananda that I'm seeking is a real Ananda, not an unreal Ananda. So the unreal Ananda means that it masquerades as joy, as we will see in more detail, but it has conditionality, that it can end in ways that are not pleasing, or just it doesn't matter how it ends, really speaking. But so the reality of my quest in life is always to have a pleased self. And this quest of the pleased self confuses me, because this is what ignorance means. You know, when we say moha, in Gita also there are three terms used: ajnana, kama, karma. Ajnana, kama, karma. And ajnana and moha are one and the same. Means that I don't know which desires, which leads to desires, which leads to karma. It's a vicious cycle. So I cannot give up my quest for always being pleased with myself. But I am confused about it, because it seems to be an experience that I get from time to time, and I get lost in exploring any further. I'm happy with my experience of joy, but I have not really explored the limits of my experiences yet. That comes much later. I mean, I can tell you from my own, my own experience after I studied Vedanta. I can just tell you my own life, because for a long time, when the truth was revealed to me by both the Swamis, Swami Chinmayananda ji and Swami Dayananda ji, I was on cloud 9. Really, the whole world seems to just disappear. And I was just happy as a clam. My goodness, I have discovered something that I never even realized it. So I was in seventh heaven, whatever terminology you want to use. And as a result of that, I am not sure that I explored the boundaries of that enough to make it last. I didn't. I know that for a fact. So there came a long period where I had the experience was never taken away from me. My Shraddha never wavered. Never. It's not like though, my goodness, there's something wrong here, Vedanta doesn't work. No, never. But still, that experience of joy, the ananda, which I had for, I think, for the first 2-3 years, slowly atrophied to a point where there was some confusion about what is going on. And in looking back at it, I can now normalize it, and I think I'm at a much better place. And what it was that the exploration of the limits was not done properly. So when it started to atrophy, I did not really do enough mananam to see how it went away. I just resented the fact that it was an experience. So in other words, and I often see that sometimes when I talk to some of the students also, they'll say, I'm very happy, I'm done. And it brings me back to, and maybe they are done. I don't know, why should I question anybody? You are an independent person, you may be much more effective in learning than I was. But nevertheless, it just gives me the doubt that perhaps you are clinging to an experiential aspect of Vedanta, where you feel very happy for the time being, without really looking into the limits of this experience. The experience is always limited. Knowledge is unlimited, but experience is limited. Experience with knowledge is unlimited, but an experience without adequate knowledge is limited. And when that goes away, your mind tends to react. Happily for me, even I had a number of years where, and you try to do all kinds of tricks. You say, no, I think I know what it is all about, and so I don't have to do any more. So you feel kind of super adequate, and then you also feel super inadequate. All kinds of issues come up. And then, this is where Ishvara's grace comes in. And if you've really been very sincere, then you may kind of waver back and forth, but you don't lose your fundamental stability. And it was interesting. This is a completely unrelated thing, but that occurred to my mind, so I'll mention it to you. So one of the exercises that was recommended to me was that as you grow older, you need to maintain your balance, okay? Because as one gets older, the portions of the brain which automatically maintains your stability becomes weaker. And so this is why people lose their balance in their old age. It just happened recently with my mother-in-law. She fell, and it was interesting. She didn't fall because of any misstep or anything. She just lost her balance. And poor thing really hit the ground and all kinds of issues. So this exercise was given to me, and I'll just mention it to you. The way to, actually I found it in this AARP magazine. Anybody who is 50 years old gets this free magazine, or you have to subscribe to it. American Association of Retired People, AARP. I found it's really a very useful thing. So I found it in one of those magazines. It says the way to practice maintaining a balance is that, and I do this every morning, there's one of the two or three exercises that I do. You put your foot forward, one foot, and then you put the other foot forward exactly in line with it. And then you put the last foot forward. And so this is how you do it. So you're actually only you're only walking single file, not both the feet. And it's difficult. In the beginning it is difficult. And so I practice it. And lo and behold, I tell you, it really saved me. So I don't know if I mentioned this I may have mentioned this to you. My wife and I had gone out for dinner, and I was parking, and she sat down, and there was a step there that I missed. So I was looking for my wife to see where is she sitting, and I said, oh, there she is. So I was looking up there, and down there was a change in the surface from, so this was an outdoor seating in Mountain View. And so on the curb side was one, and the road side there was this much, and I missed it. And you know what saved me? I would have really fallen down flat. Because if you make a misstep, you're gone. Your whole body's weight drops on you and so on. What saved me was my practicing a balance. And even though I kind of bent down, but I was able to regain my balance and never really hit the ground. I was very, very happy with that, honestly. And so, so there was a period in, going back to what I was saying earlier, there was a period where I had to struggle to understand why is it that my sense of joy has diminished, as it used to be in the first 2-3 years when I met with Swamiji. Even though I had studied more, but it wasn't there. Ishvara came to my help, and a lot of reading and so on, and it says that because you have not done adequate mananam, you have not really explored the fact that your experience was limited, had limits to it. You had not really understood that you as a human being itself has to be transgressed. I didn't quite get it. I mean, I could hear the right words and so on, but I didn't really quite get it to the point where it became a reality to me. And it still is. I'm still struggling. I want to say that I'm done. But the point was that I could have fallen down, but my sense of Shraddha and study and teaching also brought me back to the mainstream of what exactly I need to do. And now what it means is that if there is some dissipation of joy in my life, I know exactly what is there for. It doesn't really bother me as much as it used to. Because I was bothered by the fact that how come I had such a pleasant experience for 2-3 years and then after that it didn't. So I'm bringing all this up because the exploration of Ananda as we are doing requires a lot of vichara, a lot of thinking. Without that, you have not really explored the reality of Ananda. You can continue to have Ananda. And in fact, one of the disappointments of being a student of Vedanta we've talked about this before also, that in some ways you are neither here nor there. So this was the famous story of the Puranas, where there was a student called Trishanku, and Trishanku wanted to. It is not a completely appropriate story, but somewhat applicable. So he met a Mahatma, and he was studying, and the Mahatma was telling about the existence of Swargaloka, heaven, and all of those as part of the Vedantic teaching. It's brought up. Yes, there is a real heaven, no doubt about it, no question about it. And so this guy was not a true student, not a mature student. And in Swami Dayanandaji's language, he would really rap me, because he says there is no such thing as a mature student or an immature student. You are either a student or you are not. Shiksha yogyatvam, which is called shishyam. So this is what Arjuna was in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Shishyasteham shahimam prapannam. Shadimam prapannam. I am your student. That is when Krishna's teaching began. So Trishanku was in Swami Dayanandaji's language, not a student. He was an aspirant, but not a deserving student. So anyway, so he wanted to go to the heaven, and his teacher tried to dissuade him, and he says, it's very limited. What are you going to do? And you'll have enjoyment for a while. It's like going to Hawaii for a week or something like that. And it'll end. So you want something more permanent. He says, no, I want to really go to heaven. So the Mahatma, with his powers, created a path for this guy to go to heaven. And so what is said in the Puranic stories is that there are two guards, guarding the gate to heaven, as the story goes. And so they say, who are you? He says, I am Trishanku, I was sent by this Mahatma to... So they looked at their file and they said, no one told us you are supposed to go in, you cannot go in. So he says, no, he told me he's a big guy and so on. He says, I don't care how big he is. I am responsible for controlling the entry to heaven. You cannot go in. Go back. So the poor guy went back and he just complained to his Mahatma and says, well, what did you do? Didn't you send it to me? And then all the way I had to travel that much, and then I have this ignominy of being refused. So the Mahatma said, okay, I may have made a mistake. Maybe you were not completely not eligible for Swarga. I have not looked at all the qualifications. So I tell you what, I'm just going to create a separate Swarga for you. This will be a smaller version, and you can just be happy and so on and so forth for the time being. I don't know what else to do. So he created this for it. So in some ways, those who start studying Vedanta, this is the reason I'm giving this story, those who study Vedanta have a possible problem. I know I went through this, and it's very possible that others may also. And the possible problem is you are neither here nor there. So what do you mean by that? It means that before you studied Vedanta, at least once in a while you would get some pleasure out of small things. Watching a movie, going on some kind of a trip, having a wonderful meal with lots of desserts and fried things, samosas and kachori and all those kinds of things. Those are real pleasures. That's the pleasures that we get. Okay. Before we're starting Vedanta, you will see that you go to these social events and people are having fun and laughing and and so you don't get that anymore because you feel, oh, this is nothing compared to what I'm doing. So you no longer have the pleasure of worldly transactions as you used to. And neither do you have the peace of mind that you're supposed to get if you really understand even a little bit about the self-knowledge. And you do get that. You do get that after you keep progressing. You find that a sense of independence, a peace, more than pleasure, some peacefulness, non-desire, satisfaction, purnatvam. This is a sense of completeness. I don't need anything. So this is called purnam, as we do in our ending prayers. So you don't get that either. And you are neither here nor there. But what needs to sustain there, all the acharyas say that, really speaking. This is not something, and I had to go through the same thing. What they all say, what you need to do, if you find yourself in that kind of a situation, is to catch the feet of a guru. And what that means is you catch the support of Vedanta, support of Ishvara. Guru and Vedanta and Ishvara are all the same. Just as we say in the prayer, Guru Atma Vibhagaha. Murti Bheda Vibhagine. Vyomavat so Vyomavat Vyaptaya. So one which appears to be a Guru, which appears to be Ishvara, which appears to be Shastra, are one and the same. You have to catch hold of that and not let go. What it really means, if you look at all the advice given by these Mahatmas who have done it, is continue your renewal with Mananam, Shravanam and Nididhyasanam. There's no other way. This is what you need to do. And you maintain your stability by practicing. Just like this is the reason I brought up that physical example, that really it helps me physically. That because I see many of my friends at my age, they are losing balance, they are falling down. And I don't want that to happen to an extent if I can help it. And yes, of course I can help it to a certain degree. I don't know, I may fall down. I'm not saying that I'm impervious to it, no. But there is a certain discipline that you can do to maintain your stability and not really go back and forth. Anyway, all this long diatribe to say that Ananda, as we will see, when we go into the details of the Brahmananda in the 11th chapter, requires a lot of vichara. Vichara means mananam, thinking, exploring the limits. This is what triggered my thought in going into this long tale of my own life and so on. That if you have not thought through the unreality of Ananda, then you'll be confused Because even though some experience of joy is given to you, as it was given to me initially, it will not last. It will not last. And some of the students, I had a video conference some time ago, and I was just asking them, how do you feel? And they were telling me, we're doing fine. We are really doing fine. And my internal prayer was, I hope you are right. Because it is not that easy. You just go attend a few classes, listen to a few swamis and so on, without having done the necessary vichara, means that it's very possible that it's a false sense of ananda. Because I've gone through that, I can relate to it. So, in some ways, as we are studying, we need to sort of bring out these things again and again to look at the distinguishing between the real ananda and the non-real ananda. And the non-real ananda looks like the real ananda. What it means is that, so your mind is like that of a mirror. It's a very clear mirror. And when you evaluate your ananda in your life as an experiencer of ananda, of joy, you're saying, so you're supposing saying, how are you feeling? You can do this. You can just, you can ask somebody, or we do it all. You don't have to ask anybody. We do this normally. How are you today? And they'll give you some kind of an answer. And the answer would say, I'm fine. I'm okay, I'm good. I'm happy. Generally speaking, this is not case, but very often it can be done. So now the question is, if they are not really making it up, because it's very possible that a person may be very unhappy, but he doesn't want to share that unhappiness with you particularly because they don't relate to you. If it was somebody who's very close to them, they might become a little bit more honest in their feelings. But they don't want to share this fact that I am really not very happy with you. So they'll say, I'm fine, meaning that I don't want to tell you really what's going on in my life. So oftentimes they are not honest. But suppose they are honest. Suppose that they are feeling fine. They're very happy. So the question is, based on what are they happy? Here's the question. Supposing someone says, I'm very happy, and the person is being honest. Let's assume that for a while and forget about the dishonesty and hiding and so on and so forth. So if a person is honest, the question is, why are you so happy? And we don't ask that question, which is a very interesting one, because we expect people to be happy. Only when they're unhappy, we ask people, how come you're unhappy? This shows you that our natural state is happiness. We know this by now. We have studied this, and this should be very clear. That our natural state is happiness, and our unnatural state is unhappiness, rather than the other way around. So we not walk to somebody and say, oh, I see that you're very unhappy. Oh, good. No. We say, we see that you're very happy. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Can you tell me why you're happy? So if you ask somebody, or even if you just don't ask, but if somebody says, I'm very happy, you know what they're saying? They're happy. They're happy because they see their reflection in their mind. What they're watching is the state of their mind. not who they are. This is something that we have to really see. So really in our lives, all the time when I evaluate myself, you see, look at this. This is an interesting fact. I am a human being. Not I'm a human being. I think I'm a human being. Okay, I'm sure that I'm sure that I am a human being. What that means is, so if you analyze who is a human being is the one that has a mind which is backed by a lot of organs of perception and action. I have the ability to evaluate. I have the ability to experience. I can make some corrective actions. All these kinds of things. This is what constitutes a human being. Really, it constitutes any being, but the human being is the most evolved, that we have our mind, we can even look at ourselves, who we are, make corrections. You know all of that. So what it means is, my self-evaluation is only dependent on what I can see and feel and conclude. And I think a very simple example can be very useful here, instead of being lost in all these arguments and viveka and so on. Just take a torchlight. So the torchlight is a very useful device when you want to throw some light onto some things. Very clear, if your electricity fails, then a torchlight, or any other light for that matter, but let's say a torchlight, is invaluable, because you have no idea where you are, what's happening, what you're going to run into. You can't even find your food if there's no light anywhere, anything. So in order to do anything, you need a torchlight. The torchlight is a very useful thing, because you can just throw it anywhere and it simply excuse me. So it doesn't really create anything, but it reveals the existence of things. This is what a torchlight does. And the only thing that the torchlight can do is to reveal things that are within its purview. So this is what is called, the Sanskrit word is gocharam. So gocharam means that the field which is available to a torchlight is something other than itself. It can show, you can look at it up, the corners, anywhere you want to look at it. It's very capable. But it cannot reveal itself. That it cannot do. So what I'm saying is that as a human being, going back to this is the example, but if you apply this to the human being example of our life, I am like a flashlight. Really speaking. I am a highly sophisticated manufactured torchlight by Ishvara. Highly sophisticated. Amazing. And I have torchlight just can show some light, but I have eyes. I have a multi-dimensional way of throwing light on things. I can hear, I can touch, I can smell, I can taste, I can see. And so I have a very sophisticated field of view, gocharam, indriya gocharam. And furthermore, in the human beings, as apart from the other beings, trees and animals, I can only also see my mind. I mean, see means I can also objectify my mind. And this is what I do. So what it means is, to close the loop on what I was starting to point out, is that when you say I am happy, what are you evaluating? On what basis are you saying I am happy? State of your mind, isn't it? Because you are only capable of evaluating things that you experience. Just like a torchlight is only capable of lighting up things that is in front of it. Similarly, and in fact some very funny things here are doing, because it's very possible that I just thought of it, I don't know if it's applicable or not. So it's very possible that in complete darkness, if you have a torchlight, in addition to throwing light on things other than itself, you can even see the contours of the torchlight itself. There is enough dispersed life through the air particles that you can actually even see. And in fact, if supposing you throw the torchlight on a mirror, you see, supposing you throw a torchlight on the mirror and the mirror reflects it, it also reflects back on the contours of the torchlight. How long it is, what is the color of it, and what is the shape of it, it shows that. Same thing happens in our life also, that I am not only evaluating things that are separate from me, but I'm able to even evaluate the contours of my own body and mind. I can see. I've got hands and face, eyes, yes. So it is like the contours of the torchlight. I'm able to see that. So when you say I'm happy, it just means that you are telling the truth. It's not as though you're making things up. You really are happy. What it means is that you are articulating based on what your experience is, isn't it? You should be able to see this. This is obvious. And your experience of your mind tells me, I'm happy. Now, if we go back to the torch example, flashlight example, is the flashlight torch able to see the batteries that propel it, that make it function? Because to see the battery, you would have to disconnect the flashlight from the battery and make the battery as an object. And the moment you do that, the ability of the torch to objectify is lost. So what this means, the reason we're going through this kind of a thing is this. When you say I'm happy, you are really seeing the contours of yourself as a human being. That's what it is. What you are not seeing is the real you, who is the battery behind your functioning as a human being. You're not seeing that. And furthermore, you can never see it the same way as you see the whole world. So there are several things that happen. We'll come to that in a minute. But the conclusion is that if you feel temporarily happy, congratulations, that's wonderful. Because as we will see, in fact, in a great detail, there are various ways to feel temporarily happy. This is exactly what this whole chapter is going to reveal to us. There are various ways to do that. It will be Yogananda, Vishayananda, Vidyananda, Nijananda, all kinds of things we are going to go through. And so similarly in our life also, to gain Ananda, there are various ways of gaining Ananda. Various ways, not just one. I think we will see some of them. So anytime you have a success, it generates Ananda. Anytime you do something creative, here is Ananda. Anytime you appease your hunger or thirst, there is Ananda. Anytime you sleep, there is Ananda. Anytime you do better than someone else, there is Ananda. So there are so many ways of having the experience of Ananda. But what we have to see is the reality of those Anandas. Those Anandas means those periods of experiences of joy, where you just close your eyes and say, oh, this is so wonderful. So we have to explore the conditionality of it, the limitations of it, the unreality of it. Here's what we have to do. And so you can never really see and experience your own Ananda. And even that is a very funny way of saying it, because when you say I cannot experience that like I can experience any Ananda, it just means that it is not an object for you to experience. It is you, the very nature of the experience, which is not limited. So what it means is, it means two things. Okay? So there are two implications. So one is the problem enunciation, and the other one is the solution to the problem enunciation. So the problem enunciation is that you cannot see. In fact, the other way to look at it, the other way around is better to state it that way, that whatever you see, you are not. Whatever happiness you experience, you are not. Why? Because we've just gone through all the reasons. Because the gocharam, the torch, can only see things separate from itself. It doesn't see what's powering it. See, the real light is in the battery. That is the source of it. That's the source of light, is in the battery. The expression of the battery is in the bulb, in the mechanism. But really the very nature, without, so this is the dependency, this is what we say, what is electricity and what is an appliance. So the appliance is simply an expression of the electricity. It's not the very source of electricity. And if the electricity is taken off, the appliance is dead. So it's very clear, this is the problem, that you are really looking at just a tiny fraction of yourself when you say, I'm happy. You're not looking at the real self, you're looking at a reflected self, a false self. And our acharyas all say, I was reading a book by Swami Akhandananda ji, and this is a very important topic that he talks about in the Aparoksha Anubhuti. And he was saying that, really speaking, we get confused because we take the unreal Ananda. Unreal Ananda, he's calling it, is called Jada Ananda, inert Ananda. Inert Ananda means that when you look at your reflection in the mirror, it looks like you, but it's not you. You're an alive person. You're a live person. And the reflection is not alive at all. It is just, you know what it is? It is just it's just something on the mirror. So if you just feel that I've found it by just looking at the reflection, you're not looking at yourself as the reflection. So it's foolishness, really, to say that I am happy. Ultimately means that it is a very inadequate understanding of oneself. It's foolishness. So this is the problem enunciation. Means it's impossible. So one can feel what? How else am I supposed to feel good? I have to only look at my mind and so on, and then evaluate what have I done correctly, what I've done wrongly. Yet that's what life should be. Yes, it is true that life should be evaluated that way, but it is not a complete evaluation, not sufficient. So if this is the problem, then the question is, then how will I be revealed myself? If you tell me that no matter what you do, you're only looking at the false Ananda, then how am I going to find the real Ananda? And not only that, how can that be? That the real Ananda is completely hidden and I'm only seeking false Ananda. How is that possible? All these questions come up and answered in these detailed picture. So the quick summary of the answer is, it's possible for your mind You see, here's the thing. This is interesting. So let me just go back to it just before I interrupt myself for doing that, just to make a point. So your mind, the ability to think, to conclude, to the buddhi, not the manaha. Manaha is simply the karyakarta. It is simply one of the people who is doing the work of the buddhi. Right? So this is the difference between buddhi, wisdom, and manaha, just pure thinking. So the wisdom directs the thinking. Buddhi directs the manaha. So really what we're talking about is, look at buddhi. So the buddhi has two functions in this context of what we are studying. It has two functions. So one function is, it is the evaluator. Who am I? What am I doing? What should I do? All those kinds of questions. The weighty questions. Not the trivial questions, but the weighty questions. Weighty issues. What am I doing? Where's my future? Those kinds of things. So the buddhi does that. It's an evaluator. Okay? And the buddhi also is an evaluator based on certain conclusions that it sees in front of it. So the buddhi evaluates on the basis of the state of the mind. So, so this is what the state of the mind is very obvious. You just ask yourself, am I happy at this? Supposing you go out to buy something. And so when you say, I like this, so the shopkeeper will, show you a number of different, supposing you are looking for some piece of clothing, a shirt. And so the shopkeeper will, or you go to a shop, it's not the shopkeeper itself, but you can just go to a shop and you look at something like this and you say, no, I don't like that. Go to the next one, not quite right. And you just, most of the time, most of the things that you see are not something that you like. How do you evaluate it? Because your mind tells me, no, not happy. Your buddhi is now the evaluator by looking at the state of your mind. Hey, do you like this shirt? And the mind says, no, not really. Okay, let's keep on going. How about this one? No. And you find something and he says, yes, this is good. So you actually take it out and you measure it if it's the right size. Excuse me. You look at the cloth, everything seems to be fine, price is right. Then you say, yes, this is good. So now the buddhi, and then the buddhi says, okay, stop looking. Because the mind says, well, let's look for some more. And buddhi says, you know what? We've been looking for the last half hour. We've got some other work to do. You like this? Let's just buy it. So here the buddhi is now working both as an evaluator, as a searcher, and as one that evaluates the experience and says, this is good enough. Right? Okay. So now what happens is that if you look at your experiences of life, this is what we should do. This is what the mananam, the vichara means. The buddhi should be done. This is how a trained person, this is how a wisdom of one's evaluation in life should be. Okay? And what that means is that you should have a buddhi that looks at various joyful experiences and evaluates them, because the mind is saying, oh, this is good. I really like this movie. I see this so... I see this going in all these social get-togethers, and this is normal, which is good. People will say, have you seen some good movies recently? And then they don't even look at me now. They've said, this guy is, and my wife tells everybody, he never watches any movies, so don't ask him. So I'm just sitting there, just kind of nodding and, just bored about the whole thing. But nevertheless, I just wanted to see what. So they'll say, oh my gosh, you've got to see this movie. That is so wonderful. Because all these Bollywood actresses and actors are new and they're all good, and so they are all evaluating it. And then they're all on Netflix, and they're all on YouTube, and they're on Amazon Prime and all of that. Then there are recommendations. You should do this, you should do that. So the buddhi is watching all this. And it's very possible that your mind actually is quite happy with certain experiences, happy with certain movies, happy with certain travel, whatever it is, it's very happy with it. The buddhi has to say, this is good that you were happy, but for how long? And how did it end? And how will I get my next one? So it has to look at the limitations. So in some ways, the buddhi has two functions, going back to the two functions. You are evaluating, and as an evaluator, you are also evaluating the conditions, the limitations. Because the mind is happy. It says, okay, I don't care how long it is or something. At this moment, I am just enjoying it, okay? But your buddhi should stay separate from that and say, that's good, I'm glad you enjoyed it, but just look at what it took. I often think about this. From the very beginning, I actually started to really started to think about it. That if you go for a vacation, and let's say you go have a travel, and we went through this many times in our classes, so I don't want to really just make it sound repetitive. But when we go for some travel, some cruise, or some new place or something, we are suppressing our objectivity with respect to the totality of the whole experience. Excuse me. So what it means is, if you just look at this, if you just write down on a piece of paper, just keep a diary. From the moment your mind says, should we not go to Zimbabwe this year? And some, I don't know, I have nothing wrong, I have nothing against Zimbabwe, just what just came to me. So some friend says, you should go to Zimbabwe. And there the animal kingdom is just so enormous. It's something totally different. You have been going to Europe for a long time, and it's all the same thing, city life and food and all these artifacts and so on. But go to Africa, go to Zimbabwe. So you say, okay, really? Okay, as soon as you go to the laptop and you put down ZIMB, write down all the problems and work that you have to do. And now keep a journal of that. 10 minutes of looking into it. Calling a travel agent. Okay. Travel agent says, I am very busy, can I call you back? Write down your disappointment of not being able to get a travel agent right away. Write it all of that down. Oh my gosh. Then you have to rent a car, and you have to go to the airport, getting tickets. Write it all down, all the problems. And then traveling for 18 hours, not being able to go to the bathroom, having a middle seat. Write it all down on ledger, minuses and pluses. Then you reach Zimbabwe. I don't want to go through all that, but you know what we'll find. Let me just give you the conclusion. This is not a good investment. A good investment is where you put a little bit of money in and you got a lot back. You will find in this case, if you're really honest with yourself, you're using your buddhi, not your manaha. This is the other way around. You have spent $87 on this whole expedition and you get $13 back. What kind of an investment is that? So your buddhi has to see the limitations of all your ananda. All right, so we were talking about the two functions of buddhi. I haven't forgotten that. I want to go back to it. It's an important thing to do because it answers the question of if I'm not able to evaluate myself, and you're telling me that it's impossible to see myself as I am because I'm like a torchlight, not able to see myself, then how am I going to see myself? This is the question. This is how we are answering it. So here we have the buddhi, which is both an evaluator, and it should be an honest evaluator. It should be an honest evaluator. Because what happens is the mind is not an honest evaluator. Because the mind says, I don't know, I don't care about how much I had to go. This is what people will tell me. That, yeah, it was kind of difficult to get there, but once I got there, I had fun. How long did you have the fun? Can you write it down for me? 13 minutes. It's more than that, but I'm just talking about 13 cents to $1. The rest of that is pain, pain, pain. 87 cents to a pain, 13 cents of a gain. So the mind is not honest. It's just like a child which says, I don't care. But the buddhi should care. Buddhi should say, is this the right thing for us to be doing? All right, so this is the one part of the buddhi. The other part of the buddhi is the important one. And both are important, but this is Because it answers the question, if I'm not able to evaluate myself, how am I going to gain this? If you're telling me that all of my experiences of joy are not the real me, they're not real, they're unreal, then how am I going to find the real one? Happy you asked the question. That question has to appear. Most of us, in our minds, we don't even have that question. This is where the Shastra comes in. It says, my dear, don't you know you are the real joy? You are the real Ananda. What? I don't feel I am the Ananda. Exactly. What do you mean by exactly? You're never going to feel Ananda the way you feel any other Ananda. You are the very Ananda itself. What? How is that possible? Same question. I don't feel it. You don't feel it because you are trying to feel your reflection, my dear. You're looking at your reflection. Don't you see that you are the source of all feelings? You are the very source of the Ananda, which either gets revealed or doesn't get revealed. You are the constant. If it gets revealed because of certain conditions, it is reflecting you. If it doesn't feel like you, that means the conditions were not right. That means that the mind was opaque. The mind was clear. But and I am not this moment trying to explain the reality of it. I'm just giving you the glimpse of it. All of this requires the very proper study. This is what we are doing. But the Shastra's words that clearly show that what I see in my life to be my experiences really emanate from me. Like a torchlight should see, oh my God, I am just the light of the battery. I am the privileged one that expresses the potential. The real source of my light is the battery. And a battery that, in this particular example, that never runs out. Unlike the electric vehicle batteries, this is a battery that never runs out. Never runs out? Isn't that amazing? Who says that? Listen to me. Listen to what the Shastra says. You are oblivious of it. You are the real battery that never runs out. In fact, it is not born even. You have always been that battery. You are the very source of that Ananda. Now the buddhi. See, now this is where I'm going to stop, and we will, this has been a long, without even taking a verse. I was thinking of taking 4 or 5 verses. I never got there. But just to conclude, the buddhi has 2 functions. One function is to evaluate, as we went through in great detail. The other function is to understand. My goodness, you're right. Through vichara, through mananam. This is the truth. So it is the buddhi, the internal buddhi that I have, the ability to see that, my goodness, this is, and then bring your doubts out, as we will do. I'm just giving you a kind of like an overall commentary on this instead of going through verse by verse. But if you go through these erudite commentaries on the Pancadasi, starting with the 11th, this is exactly what they're trying to show. Anyway, so we will look into that, and if you want, we can just very quickly do one thing. So we have already gone through verse number 7 last time. Vidyate hridaya grantihi chidyante sarva samshayaha kshiyante cha asya karmani tasmin drishte paravare. Then I think what I will do next is switch over to verse number 11. And with all the background that we have done, I think that we will go into this rather quickly next time, but just very briefly before we do that. It says, now it looks at the false sense of ananda that we can experience. And the reason we are making a tour of the false sense of ananda is to see that the presence of the falsity depends upon the presence of the reality. See? So each of the false ananda, if we put our buddhi into it, can tell us about what the mistake is and what is the real ananda. This is the reason for doing it. This is why we have a tour of these other ones, and we will go into this in some detail. But very briefly, in verse number 11, it says, number 11 says, Anandas trividhaha. The Ananda is three of them. Brahmanandaha, Vidya Sukham. Sukham means Ananda. Vidyananda, Brahmananda, Vidyananda, Tatha Vishayananda. 3 of them. Brahmananda, Vidyananda, and Vishayananda. And the Brahmananda is further subdivided into Yogananda, Atmananda, and Advaitananda. So there are 5 altogether. Yogananda, Atmananda, Advaitananda, Vidyananda, and Vishayananda. So this we will see next time as to what are these, and under what conditions they come up, and more importantly, it is pointed out that, don't you see that all of them are nothing but a reflection of the real Ananda, which is Brahmananda. Brahmananda is the real Ananda, and all these other offshoots are nothing but they are reflections, then they are not the real ones. But the presence of the not real ones reveals the real one. You see? Because if you cannot see the error, you cannot find the non-error. This is why we cannot find Atma Vidya when we are asleep. Because there is total ignorance. Total ignorance cannot reveal the reality. Just like in the case of the rope and snake example, the rope cannot appear as a snake unless there is some light. If it is complete darkness, you don't even know what the mistake is. But if there is semi-light, semi-darkness, then you can ascertain there is something going on here. Not ascertain, you can find out something is going on and then ascertain the truth from it. So similarly here also, the presence of the false anandas are very essential. Because you cannot find the real Ananda unless you can experience the unreal Ananda. But with the buddhi, you can point out to the real Ananda by seeing how the unreal Ananda expresses itself in your experience. So this is how the teaching progresses. So this is what we will do. So with that, I close the class. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. You cannot find Good to see you all. Good. Wonderful. I just wanted to mention to you that tomorrow is Ganesha Chaturthi, and the ashram is celebrating the Ganesha Chaturthi with a homa, which is a Ganapati homa, which is done in our homa building in Sailorsburg. For those of us that were there, they used to have a 10-minute homa early in the morning, if you recall. So homa means where fire is lit. It is not just a yajna, not just chanting, but an offering to the fire. So that will be on, but it's very early in the morning from California time. So it is 7 to 8:30 Eastern time. So it means 4 to 5:30 tomorrow morning. And if you're interested, you can go to the ashram website and go to the YouTube. And one interesting thing is that they actually have also given a copy of the text of the prarthana, of the prayers that will be offered to Ganapati. So you can actually have that in front of you and chant it if possible along with it. But I hope to see it tomorrow morning, and I just wanted to let you know that's a possibility for you to see. Okay, excellent, very good. I don't see any questions. So with that, I will close the class, and we will hopefully see you next week. Hari Om.